The Warag introduced modern agricultural practices to a desperate population who finally won through to save the day. Now, most of England and Europe's towns and cities had been flattened, and following the heroic British model imported from America, the European Union helped to put a whole continent back together based on elective democracy, square buildings, the consumer society, etc., etc. All this inspired, of course, by Ford, Fordson, Bosch, Bayer, Monsanto, and not long after IBM. All well recognised as very fascist enterprises, and yet nobody batted an eyelid. We are beginning to see through the fences some 70 years later as we realise that the European Union and its common agricultural policies have done nothing but put distance between producers and consumers, destroy biodiversity, ruin soils, put farmers into self-perpetuated slavery, poison our food and homogenise our general culture. Now, the European Union will link up with other unions like the United States through trade agreements like TAFTA. Now, sidetracking a little, there is an incredibly good series of books that I recommend to all conspiracy theorists. They are called the Canopus in Argus series by a writer named Doris Lessing, and I recommend quite strongly that you read them in the following order. Number 1, number 3, number 4, number 5, and then if you like number 2, which, although it's not completely irrelevant, it's not completely relevant either to the actual situation. Now, number 1 is an alternative history of the Earth, a little bit of a messianic hero story, and then the thing gets really interesting from about the middle of number 3 onwards. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, by strange coincidence, the evil overlord of the Earth in these books from the planet Shamat is named TAFTA. Now, these books were written in the 1970s, don't forget. And there is an amazing scene in the middle of Volume 3 where TAFTA is incarnated in the late 20th century as a David Icke type of personality. He is on television telling the truth to the world, disclosing information about how the Earth and human energy is being hijacked by extraterrestrials and being sent off to Shamat by a way station on the moon. At the end of his conference, he runs into a representative from the planet Sirius who was awaiting him in the studio corridors. He tells her triumphantly that the planet is now his, the deception is complete, because he has publicly told the truth to the world, and not a soul believes him. Now, our TAFTA is of course a slightly different character. It is actually a trade document that is locked in a basement in Brussels, and access to read it is very difficult indeed. You do need to be a selected member of the European Parliament, cannot copy, photograph or take devices that would allow either or both into the basement with you, and you can only see the document for 1 hour, even though it is apparently over 600 pages of unreadable techno-babble. The essential of this contract is that the multinational Nazis in ties will be able to claim damage against nation-states in a court of law if we ban the use of their chemical weapons-based food production tools. That word liberalism has turned incredibly sour indeed, because it is liberal, that means free, right up top, exactly where we need high levels of responsibility, rigour and absolute fucking transparency under a very tight public scrutiny. Rigour and red tape, ironically, are abundant here at the bottom of the pyramid, exactly where we need liberalism, where we need freedom of movement and the capacity to generate a multitude of different solutions on the ground without the bloody legal junkies and civil servants putting their sticks in our spokes all the time. Despite the obvious absurdity of the situation, down here we are permanently held up by legislation, while up there they stuff themselves with freedom as they write their own rules. For the moment. Now, the last link in this black chain is of course the banks. Where would we be without them? Now, with all these tools in their toolbox, they have progressively and quite successfully made us completely dependent on units of exchange that we call money. And they now have the sole and unique right to produce these same unities under a form called debt. Alan Watts once said that an economic crisis is a bit like a building site. You turn up for work on Monday morning, all the tools are there, all the wood, stone, sand, lime, screws and nails are there too, but the foreman says to you, "No work today, boys. We cannot build the house because we've run out of centimetres." You see, the problems begin when unities of exchange cease to represent wealth, but actually become a product in their own right. When money can grow more money without the energy first changing form into commodities or labour first, we start running into very serious problems. The real wealth of the world is all around us, but banks have progressively made us forget and then put us into debt, firstly to wage war against each other and then to rebuild a new world full of fucking specialists, which means that huge amounts of cultural knowledge have of course been lost, and so for the simplest of tasks we have to use their money. And every time we use their money, of course, we pay their taxes and we continue to feed their system. And every time we feed their system, well, it gets stronger. We put ourselves into debt for half a lifetime to finance the building of a house that actually costs a tenth of the debt incurred. And now every nation state is also in debt, and our taxes are rising permanently to pay interest to private banks to finance the wars that help put this system into place across the globe, or plane, of course, depending on your earth-shaped convictions. Everything we do in the modern world is feeding it. Just look at supermarket distribution in France. If you add up just the fuel tax and the social charges on the driver's wages, every heavy goods lorry on French roads is pumping about 40 euros an hour into the system. The driver then spends all his wages on mortgage repayments, interest, food, clothes, gadgets. It all goes back in. Even if you live on social welfare, they get it all back anyway. The majority of the poorest people in a welfare state do unfortunately spend most of their money on tobacco and alcohol and very cheap food. There is, however, an exemplary and growing minority that consider themselves to be autonomous civil servants working for humanity if they claim welfare. So they grow their own food, live rent-free and tax-free thanks to the system, wear second-hand clothes, and spend their time helping out with worthwhile projects or using hours banks to exchange services amongst themselves tax-free, all the while being able to be available to correctly feed and educate their children and keep the next generation away from televisions and video games. These humble people are among my biggest heroes. There's some of them living near you. Probably good to go out there and try and find them. Now, if you work full-time, pay taxes, and buy all your needs through the conventional routes offered to you by the integrated extractive dictatorship, roughly 80% of your vital life energy is funding this blanket destruction every day, and this is where we cross tracks with the notion of the Matrix on a physical level. And the biggest visual invisible irony is that money is, of course, now digital, which means it is a binary code of zeros and ones. And when you line up the first vertical line of binary code, which is 01010101, and you look at it from a certain angle, well, it makes up the exact same chains with which physical slavery began. We are collectively feeding the binary monetary system to create billionaires. Now, that's quite a shocking number, that billion. The human brain can hear the word, but it can't actually conceive of the quantity involved. So I'm going to take a little clip from Max Eigen, and I'm going to ask you to imagine we're going to step into a time machine and go back in time 1 billion seconds. 1 billion seconds is equivalent to 31 years, 9 months, 16 days, 13 hours, 26 minutes and 24 seconds. To earn $1 billion, euros or pounds, you would have to work for 32 years, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and get paid $3,600 euros or pounds an hour, spend next to nothing, and of course pay no taxes. You can see how that works. They pile up the unities of exchange, and we have fallen into the trap of believing that we need these unities to access the wealth that used to be all around us and could be all around us if we put it back. So, who are the they? These them with a capital T. Well, personally, like many other people, I saw through the system shortly after 9/11, and I had already at that time quit my life completely, and I had literally nothing else to lose, so I went on a quest to find out who the they are. And I finally found out in 2012, and my theory hasn't blown a tyre since. Indeed, it proves itself to me every day. So who are the they? Well, the theories are many. The communists, of course, say it's the capitalists, and for the religious faithful, it's the devil, Lucifer, or Satan. All of these things are his works with a capital H. For the Buddhists, it could be the Naga, these kind of snake reptile people who are a bit dubious and live under the earth. And for the conspiracy theorists, That's theorists with an F. It's the Anunnaki reptilians, the Illuminati, the Freemasons, the Rothschild family, the Zionists, the Jesuits, the Flat Earth Society. I mean, fuck me, it could be just about anybody, couldn't it? The possibilities are as endless as our capacity to deny that we are responsible. I'll say that again. The possibilities are as endless as our capacity to deny that we are responsible. For the most advanced among us, it is the fault of something that we call the ego. You see, the them have many incarnations and in many different cultures, and trying to track them down and catch them is about as easy as catching smoke with a pin. Now, I've been down all of these rabbit holes, and just like Alice down a rabbit hole, we find all kinds of weird and wonderful stuff. So could it be that the Queen of Hearts is behind the croquet conspiracy, or is it the caterpillar enthroned on suspicious seats of fungus, repeating that very important question of, who are you? See, rabbit holes actually serve only one major purpose. You can stick your head down a dark hole, hoping to find light where none can possibly exist. All the while you have your arse in the air, ready for a good buggering from the system. And the comparisons with Alice don't stop there either. You see, when you go right to the end of the rabbit hole, you will also find the looking glass, and the devil you were searching for stares back at you with your own eyes. The solution is always contained within the problem. That is the nature of a fractal universe. If we are the problem, then we are the solution. And if you talk about the them with a capital T, and it doesn't matter diddly squat who the them are, it simply means that you aren't responsible enough to deal with the weight of the freedom that you say you want. Say that again as well. It simply means that you aren't responsible enough to deal with the weight of the freedom that you say you want. And when the them see you or hear you, they love you because you are showing the them that their new sheep pen is working perfectly, but you are also fundamentally feeding their existence and their evolution into stronger and more powerful incarnations. If you are a them ranter, you are paradoxically completely aware of what's going on, but too fundamentally scared of yourself to get up off your ass and do something about it. Even saying that it is your ego is a trap. Be very, very careful. Creating any entity other than you means that you aren't ready to be free. You can proclaim your consciousness and your awakenedness on Facebook and forums all day long. It doesn't mean fuck all until it filters down into daily responsibility for your own acts, thoughts and words. If you go out into the street and start voicing all this conspiracy theory stuff in the local public arena, you just get taken for a nut job or accused of being anti-Semitic or whatever other knee-jerk reaction this kind of stuff sparks off in your area. We can all spout off on our keyboards within closed groups. That's easy. Taking the idea out into the so-called real world and doing something with it is another matter altogether. And this is where a lot of us are going wrong. So let's look at why. And I'm going to try and approach this for you in a real nuts and bolts kind of way, because I have managed to take this out into the real world and do something with it. This nuts and bolts approach is something I've been doing for years in my own life, finding solutions and inventing methods to problems on the physical plane, and actually finding methods to stuff on the invisible plane, all the while listening quite regularly to alternative media, audiobooks, documentaries and stuff going through my ears while I'm working. I have been accumulating and digesting enormous amounts of information and looking at the problem from every angle I can, and secretly waiting for somebody else to step up and be as specific and pragmatic about it as I know I can be, and so far nobody has. So a little while ago I figured out it might be for me to do. So to find a way out of the conspiracy, we are going to have to go back in, so breathe out and relax. All of those characters under the universal heading of the them are going to once more become a reality. Just for the benefit of the exercise, you get to keep your teddy bear for another couple of hours. The Warag introduced modern agricultural practices to a desperate population.